When it comes to food costs, one hidden burden is red tape, with a growing burden of regulations that add up, ultimately at the till. Pierre Petelle is CEO of CropLife Canada. Thanks for being with us, Pierre.
Well, my pleasure, Amanda.
So I know this is something you've raised before. What are we talking about when you talk about sort of these regulations that add up for both, I think, the producers and the processors?
Yeah, so it's all along the whole value chain. So I mean, our members are primarily at the input side at the beginning, but it carries through the whole value chain in agriculture, and it's not just agriculture. There's a chorus of voices from Chamber of Commerce to the Business Council, Federation of Independent Business, that are all saying the same thing. The number one issue for business in Canada today is regulatory burden and the lack of real ambition to do much about it.
And what are some of those things? Obviously, they're there for a reason, but give me some examples of things that we think we don't need any longer.
Well, and that's the thing. It's not a question of necessarily scrapping them. It's just, our industry is heavily regulated. So the seed technology and crop protection products that farmers use. But if the burden is heavier here in Canada than other jurisdictions, what happens is those companies start to avoid Canada. And so now you've got farmers in other jurisdictions who we compete with that now have access to better technology, the latest innovations. And that's the real risk, is this incremental year after year decline in our competitiveness.
We did see, of course, some new rules around emissions, intensity in the sector. That was especially focused, of course, on the fertilizer side of things. Has some of that relaxed or changed at all?
Well, we're certainly seeing attention to this issue. So, while we're still raising the alarms and needing to get more attention on this, certainly from the Prime Minister and many of his close cabinet ministers, we're seeing the narrative start to change. So we are seeing some action, and certainly in our area too, we've seen some concrete steps. But I guess what we want to make sure is that we don't miss this opportunity, that we increase the level of ambition and maybe the pace as well.
As we make new trade deals, as we clearly are setting out to do, are some of these things that we can actually write in, actually standardizing an approach with other countries?
Yeah, well, that's a whole other area. When you're talking about, regulatory alignment, certainly Canada is viewed as a very trusted science-based regulator. And so even though we're not the biggest market, there's a lot of other countries that look to us for guidance on sort of decisions we've made. And so if we can be sort of the market where we make decisions fast, they're done predictably, and they're based on science, that can have an impact, yes, in trade deals, can have an impact on our members' willingness to bring those technologies to Canada, because it might have benefits, in other parts of the world as well.
We've been talking about kind of the built-in food inflation and how much of it is domestic versus how much we import. From your point of view, at that input level, that kind of base agricultural level, how much of the high prices do you think are sticky and will stay with us?
Well, this is the million-dollar question. I think when you ask food processors, when you ask farmers, when you ask companies like ours, most of them rank regulatory burden as one of the top issues or the top issue. And so certainly that's going to have an impact on the cost of doing business in Canada. And then that's carried through the whole value chain and amplified at each step along the way. And so this is an area that, I mean, to use a hockey analogy, and many of you use this term already, but this is an own goal situation. And this is something that's 100% in our control. And whether it's interprovincial barriers that we've created ourselves or regulatory burden that has piled up year after year after year, this is something that's definitely fixable.
We just saw a big investment in Farm Credit Canada. There's kind of a push on to promote innovation in the sector, treat it like the really important domestic and trade sector that it is. Are you optimistic about some of those moves?
Yeah, I mean, that's exciting news, right? To take $2 billion from FCC and turn that into $7 billion with other investment firms, that's a very positive sign. And I think that attractiveness of Canada as we're just the right size. We've got innovative farmers, we've got the land, the water, the resources. So we should be attracting investment. And this actually shouldn't even be a big news story if things were going right. There was a speaker I saw from the Netherlands, and Netherlands is number 2 exporter of food and agriculture in the world. And yet they're the size of one of our smallest provinces. And he said, I only wish my country had the endowments that Canada had. So we've got a lot of work to do.
Got to leave it there, Pierre. So good to have you with us for this.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Amanda.
Pierre Petelle is the CEO of CropLife Canada. Time for the takeaway and designing a food system that works for everyone. Canada's food system is complex, with big portions of it dedicated to export markets. In fact, despite being a relatively small economy, Canadian exports dominate some foodstuffs. 73% of the world's hemp seed exports are from Canada, 28% of the cranberries, and 20% of the canola. But the fact is, we make the bulk of what we consume. 70% of Canadians' food is manufactured right here. So while some of the inflation we've seen is global in nature due to extreme weather and trade tensions, a big chunk of it is good old-fashioned wage inflation being fed through to prices. And while that can feel painful, wage inflation is one way to right the balance between higher prices and our ability to afford them. They can be a one-time reset, albeit to a higher level. If that's what happened in Canada between 2022 and 2024 to catch up to the post-pandemic price increases, then we should begin to see a leveling off of food inflation, at least domestically. If we don't, it might be a signal to government to take a closer look at what's going on. Food that Canadians can afford is an obvious shared goal. Offering an expanded GST credit will help some families, but given the massive increase in the use of food banks, more help might be needed, since the last thing anyone wants is a system where government sets prices or limits profit for that matter. The answer might lie in looking at the demand side, notably where incomes are in Canada. That might include a hard look at the minimum wage, or it could mean we refocus on our guaranteed income. At the moment, we have an extremely bifurcated picture for food. On the one hand, it's a robust export business with thriving entrepreneurs. We have innovative manufacturers and processors who employ tens of thousands of us, and they are paying higher wages. But if all Canadians can't afford the basic and, dare we say, healthy necessities of life, the system is not working. My takeaway, inflation works its way through an economy and takes some adjustment, but it only works for that economy if wages do the right amount of catch-up. That's Taking Stock for this week. I'm Amanda Lang. Thanks for being with us.